It's me, David Chen. I'm here with Melissa Taminga, and we are broadcasting our thoughts about what is happening in the world today. It is August 16th, 2020. Melissa, how has your week been overall?
Overall, not much change, which is not great. But it's been okay. I mean, generally speaking, we are fairly at an even kind of keel. And I have shared with you before that we're kind of been worried about my husband's job, losing his job just for multiple reasons, including
Mm,
the pandemic. And we did get a little bit of hope this week that maybe if layoffs are imminent, they're not going to happen anytime soon. So that was like one kind of bright spot that takes a little bit of the just fear out of daily life. So
that
that was
is
something
good.
that was good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear. We've been doing these broadcasts just kind of talk about what's happening in the world. It's obviously very stressful to follow on a weekly basis. So we kind of just are here to react to things, hear from you all in the various chat rooms that I'm broadcasting to right now. I'm in Facebook, I'm in YouTube, and Periscope right now. If you want to talk and let us know how you're doing, feel free to pop your comments into the chat room. I will see it. I'll put it up. We can talk about it. Yeah, so I see Micah Haley is already in the chat room from Periscope. He's saying, "Hey friends, hey Micah Haley, hope you're doing well."
Hey there.
Yeah, anyone else? I think theoretically this feed will monitor all the chats and I'll see them all. So, okay. So Patrick is also in the YouTube chat. Hello, Patrick. Oh, hey. So DJM in Periscope has a great question to start off with. Any thoughts on
Yeah.
Kamala Harris as the VP?
Wow. Starting out with a bang.
Yeah.
I'm really happy. I mean, and interestingly enough, I just kind of felt like you sort of like saw all the picks that were out there, and of course, Kamala Harris's name was floated as one that was a relatively likely pick. But I think when it was announced, I was sort of surprised by my own emotion just at the choice. I mean, just this idea that this African American, Asian American woman for the first time is hopefully going to be vice president. I mean, that just felt like overwhelmingly great in a sort of landscape of news that just feels unrelentingly bad. And
Yeah.
so I think like my just that was sort of the strongest emotion that I had, just that joy that day, which I haven't felt for a really long time.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about. I think that um, I saw some complaining online that she's like not
Yeah.
left enough. She's like not
Right.
progressive enough.
Right.
Uh, it's not an ultra safe choice. Like it's certainly like
Yeah.
picking like someone like Warren might have been even riskier.
Right.
Um,
Someone who's more
but
overtly, yeah, progressive. Hmm.
it feels like a solid choice that's like kind of has been in line with Joe Biden's politics in the
Yeah.
past, but like is still like somewhat more progressive enough that like if and when the mantle does fall to her to run for the big job, which it does
Yeah.
feel like in his
That's a
conversations,
possibility,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
it feels like a distinct possibility that like it will eventually fall to her to like potentially run for president. It's probably something that he's interested in. I mean, Joe
Yeah.
Biden is 77 years old right now.
Yeah.
There's been whispers, like various rumors that he'd only be a one term, like he'd only do it for
Yeah.
one term, right the
Mhm.
ship and then get out. You know, like that's also possible.
Right.
Um, and so I'm viewing it less as like is she like I'm viewing it no not less but like she seems like a solid VP pick, but I'm also thinking like
Hmm.
is this person very possibly going to be the president one day, and viewing it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is exciting in many ways, but I do think that there is some risk in terms of like her not being progressive enough on one
On
side,
the
and
one
then
side.
maybe
Hmm.
some, let's say, old-fashioned people might not be used to somebody that looks and sounds like her,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that could be a risk as well from a swing state voter perspective. So
Hmm.
it's I would say it's an interesting choice. I think it has been a foregone conclusion. People are like, oh yeah, of course it's going to be Kamala Harris, but like I still think it's an interesting choice. It's one that excites me,
Yeah.
and overall, I'm happy about it. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, okay.
Also discouraging just to see the immediate attacks, which you knew were going to come, but
Well, what's been fascinating to me is that the attacks have been like largely incoherent. I think
that's true. Yeah.
there has not been like a it doesn't seem like there's like a unified attack. That's something that's kind of genius about the pick is that she kind of defies easy categorization,
Yeah. I think
right?
you're right.
Because
Yeah.
she was an attorney general. You know,
Hmm.
some people have referred to her as a cop. You know what I'm saying? And it's like
Yep.
so I think that like it's interesting that there's not that much you can throw. They're kind of Teflon a little bit, you know.
Right.
She's
Right.
kind of
Yeah. But she's
she's
for
kind of
things.
Teflon a little bit, I think.
Yeah. She's for things like Medicare for all, but it's harder to say, oh, the socialist. You're like, no,
Yeah, it doesn't.
no.
No, doesn't make any sense. So that's been
Yeah.
kind of nice to see. Is that like, yes, there have been attacks. There have been stupid things said like that. You know, editorials from once respected news magazines that shall remain nameless. But overall, it feels like the opponents have struggled to put anything together, and that's been nice. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think even the racist attacks feel like they're been immediately confronted in a way that maybe they weren't necessarily with President Obama.
right, right. So let's talk about the big news story of the week, which is
Yeah.
that the post office is in danger, right?
Yes.
So New York Times piece that said postal crisis ripples across nation as election looms. Trump's furious objection to mail-in balloting and new Trump allied postmaster general are raising fears about the election and the postal service. So yeah, what do you feel? You read this piece. You know, what are some big takeaways from this that you have? Overall thoughts, overall feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading some pieces all week, but this does feel like a pretty comprehensive piece hitting on all the various elements of the kind of horror of what this is, both from the Postmaster General himself and his wife and their the fact that they have holdings in rival companies, and then just kind of what's happening at many of these local levels. So mail sorting machines are being removed. We had the restructuring of the management, so it is more centralized around the Postmaster General. They're cutting back hours from these postal workers, and so mail at the end of the day that's not delivered just remains undelivered. There was this warning from the post office that to 46 states, right, that ballots may not be counted if they have mail-in ballots because the Postal Service can't deliver those. There were reports of postal boxes being taken out in at least a couple of states. And also there is, of course, not just apart from the election, the story talks about the fact that many people rely on the Postal Service for getting their prescription medications. And a lot of people, diabetics, for example, are waiting for medication and they're literally not able to take the medication they should be taking because of the delays and the new delays in the Postal Service. So this just feels like a catastrophe on so many levels that impacts people's health, it impacts businesses, and it impacts, of course, our upcoming election. And I think one of the difficulties I've been thinking about this week is what do we do about it? I mean, this feels like a genuine, very specific kind of crisis. And so many of the crises that we've been watching unrolling over the last almost 4 years you just sit here feeling kind of helpless, and you call your representative, but then nothing seems to happen. It just is sort of this slow rolling disaster. And so I think one of the things I've been thinking about this week is like what this seems genuinely like a very specific kind of crisis.
Well,
in a way.
so yeah, I mean, before you get to like what we might do about it, I think just
Sure.
like on a sheer emotional level,
Oh yeah.
it's deeply upsetting. The post office, despite
The Postal Service.
despite the fact that it's not perfect and you often need to wait in long lines and the service is slow, it is a almost universally beloved institution in American life. Right?
It's a guarantee. No matter where you live, you can mail something.
Yes. And for the entirety of American history, most people in the country have had that guarantee, right? Like that like every address will get their mail picked up. Every address will get their mail delivered to. And I honestly never thought they would come for it.
Yeah.
Because it's hugely popular in rural areas, red states as well.
Across
Um,
like party lines, it's popular with everybody.
arguably, it's more important in red states
Yeah, right, exactly. Hmm.
because it's more rural. It's harder to get things. There are fewer competitors
Hmm.
to the postal service. So I just never thought they'd come for it because it's like,
Yeah. It seems like it would
why
be
would
wildly unpopular.
why
Yeah.
would you cut off your nose to spite your face? Like it's just such a self-inflicted wound
Yeah.
that will take a long time to recover from. But
Hmm.
you cannot ascribe logic and sense to what is happening in the world
No,
right now a lot of the time,
no.
right? So
Hmm.
you gotta often just understand that like the people who are working are trying to win at all costs. There's this thing that like Bill Barr said that really has chilled me. I've thought about it quite a bit
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
last few weeks.
Hmm.
It's either Barr was being interviewed for whatever, some terrible thing that he did, and somebody asked him the
Yeah.
question like, how do you think history will remember you?
Mm.
And he said, well, history is written by the winners, and
Right. Yes, I remember that.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I've just been thinking about that nonstop. It's like basically like the people who are responsible for all these terrible acts of violence on American life.
Hmm.
All they care about is winning, and they want to be the winners, and they want to write the history. And
Yeah. And the fact that
we're
he
seeing
was,
that happen. We're seeing that happen.
yeah, and the fact that he was I mean, usually when that phrase "history is written by the winners," you're more talking about the fact of who hasn't been able to be a part of history and what stories are left untold, and that's usually couched in this kind of, a criticism or a critique of how we generally tell history.
Yeah.
But Barr was like, "History is written by the winners, and that's good." um, so yeah, just the unabashed embrace of that is part of what feels so deeply disturbing about it.
So, yep, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and connecting to the mail too, I don't know if it was in the same hearing, but he also made this comment that mail fraud, that mail fraud is rampant. He made this claim, and then whoever was questioning him, I can't remember who it was, said, "Well, what evidence do you have for that?" And he said, I don't have as evidence. It's just common sense." So here you have the Attorney General of the United States basically saying without evidence and boldly saying without evidence that mail fraud is a thing for an election, and he's willing to sort of stand by that. It just, that adds this layer then to this crisis right now of knowing that the Attorney General is not going to be concerned about the mail
Right.
crisis
Does not
because,
believe in the integrity
yes,
of the mail to begin
of
with.
voting by mail.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's all deeply upsetting, and I guess I will say that informally, I mean, I'll tell you a story,
Yeah.
which is that a few weeks ago I started ordering. I've been ordering a lot of stuff from Amazon and other online places because I don't want to go to the store.
Yes.
And a few weeks ago, I ordered a bunch of things. I ordered probably a couple $100 worth of stuff. So it was not like a ton, but it was like a significant amount. Like it'd be enough that if I lost it, I would be pretty irritated.
Yeah.
And so I ordered a couple $100 worth of stuff, and just like foods, food and supplies for my office and stuff like that. And none of it was getting to me. It was showing as delivered, but it wasn't getting to me.
Yeah.
And I think what was happening was it was being delivered to the wrong mailbox in my I live in a kind of a complex, and it was delivered to the wrong mailbox. So I go down to the post office, I physically went there to explain, try to figure out what was going on. And after waiting a long time, I got to see some people. And this guy was saying, the mail person told me, "Hey, yeah, it's been tough lately. They've been basically adding new routes without adding people to cover them." And he said also, it's extremely, and part of that is not even Trump's fault necessarily, by the way, because it's in Seattle, there'll be a house that has it's like one house, and then it will be bulldozed and be replaced with a luxury condo or whatever that has like 8 units in it. So
Yeah.
that one address instantly becomes 8 addresses. Now that's like 8 times as much work, but like they don't
Okay, yeah.
assign like 8 times as many people to like cover it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So so that stuff is happening just even pre any messing with the post office. And he said he was saying it's really hard to find people who want to work in the post office because
Wow.
it doesn't pay that well. You could easily find another labor job that pays around the same amount of money,
Sure.
and you need to walk 10 miles per day. You know, and so
Is
it's
that
like
really?
yeah, and so it's
Wow.
like it's you know it's a tough. He's like people who work here like work here because they love the job, you know, because
Yeah,
they're connecting
sure.
with people, they're delivering people's mail for like decades.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like a
anyway, that's just,
community.
it's
Yeah.
like a community building thing. Anyway, that's just like a little side story as to what's going on. It's not doesn't tackle like the things that we're actually discussing, like the real problems that we're actually talking about. But it did, you know, it was something that made me think about these problems that we're having today with the
Yeah.
mail and
Yeah.
the assault that is taking place on it.
And that, yeah, something that you would, it's such a basic thing that you've done for a long time, even before the pandemic. You order something and it comes. Like you can't count on that basic thing to happen. That just feels so disruptive in a really visceral way.
Oh yeah, so that was what I was going to ask you. Is like, what is your has been your experience with the mail recently? Because I see on Twitter like horror
Yeah.
stories, right? Like you said, like people who are diabetic that can't get their medication, and like medication is a huge part of it, but also like so much of the U.S. economy depends on people being able to send things to people, and like bills,
Right.
checks, like
Yeah.
insurance payments, all this stuff depends on the USPS. And so I'm curious, like, have you had any disruptions? I haven't yet.
Yeah, we haven't really
Yeah.
either
So
that I'm aware of.
in Seattle, we haven't yet, but I wonder if they're coming.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also just that, like, um, at the end of the day, like, rich people are going to be able to find ways of getting mail to people. You know,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
just going to be
You
yet
pay someone to
another.
take it. Yeah.
It's just going to be another thing to like further the class divide, which
Yeah, for
is
sure.
upsetting. So anyway, we got some questions in the chat here. Rob Wolf, longtime viewer, first time chatter. If you were in charge of the virtual conventions, what would you do differently that you couldn't do in the physical realm? I assume Rob is referring to the fact that like
Like the political
the-
conventions
yeah.
or just
like
yeah.
the I think the DNC announced their like speech slate this
Right.
week, right?
Yeah. Which
I,
had some disappointments. But we won't go into that.
I don't have any general thoughts on how I would tackle the conventions differently, except I think there needs to be more education in America about how to create a video stream that looks and sounds good.
Yeah.
And
I think
if you're
that's very true.
if you're
Yes.
watching this right now, I think what you're viewing right now looks and sounds pretty good. And that is because Melissa puts up with me, and she accommodates my requests of, hey, please sit in a room where you have good lighting. Please use this microphone.
And I
Please
have
use a
like
pop
two
soap.
hot lights shining on me right now.
You're just being blasted by hot lights right now.
Yes, on a 90-degree day.
And obviously, I mean, I don't need to speak about my situation. It's obviously pretty good. But suffice to say, like, not everyone has this, and I would just love it if politicians, celebrities who are being interviewed, etc., would start using like decent equipment for their talk show interviews and their, you know, what have you, because a lot of it just looks and sounds like garbage in my opinion, and that's all I care about, Rob. I don't care about like how you'd arrange it or whatever. Just make it look and sound good. Also, Rihan in the Periscope says, add graphics to support the speeches. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think because we are used to so many great visuals, and then like you're going to watch the DNC convention and it just looks the stream is bad, the lighting is bad, they don't have like it's just
I
who would watch that?
I hope they're able to, but I just basically I think there needs to be like widespread education about this topic. It's not just like
Just for
it's not just for
generally
DNC. It's
people.
just like everyone. Like this is how we're going to be working for years probably. So
Yeah.
like we all just need to like get better webcams into our computers. I'll say Microsoft does a pretty good job of that. Rob and I used to work at Microsoft together, so like Microsoft's laptops are pretty good, but like most laptop webcams are terrible, including
Yeah.
virtually all of Apple's. Anyway, I'm going off on a rant, but suffice to say, that's the one thing I would change.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Rob says AirPods are fine to listen to podcasts, but they are not great microphones. So true.
I see a
So
lot of
true.
people using those. Yes.
I know, and they sound like complete trash in my
It
opinion.
sounds really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so any other comments on the post office? Like, is there stuff you're doing to kind of counteract this?
I mean, I did make a contact my representatives this week. I sent I used Resist Bot. If people are familiar with Resist Bot, you can just text Resist to this particular number, and then you compose a message, and it sends it out to whoever you want. And I sent it to my 2 senators and my rep. So I did that a couple times. It's a really phone. I have called on the phone, but it's just a little bit more intimidating. And then of course you can't do 3 all at the same time. So that's one thing I did. And then I'm also I have done this thing called Postcards to Voters, which came around before the 2018 midterms. And it's essentially this kind of grassroots movement to people essentially send these handwritten reminders to targeted voters who are in a Democratic or they're to Democrats. And it basically just reminds people who are already kind of registered as Democrats, like, here's the voting deadline, here's the person that you should vote for. And then it gives you kind of these things to say on the postcard. So you basically can sign up for this. They vet you to make sure that you're going to do it right and who you are. And then they send you how many of your addresses you want to sign up for, like 5 to 25, something like that. And then you get these addresses and you write physical postcards to other people. And it did seem like in this time now, that's a good way to just, buy stamps for one thing, and then actually kind of be a part of the democratic process, reminding people to vote and to vote early, and that kind of thing. So that's one thing. I actually just ordered stamps, a roll of 100 postcard stamps, and I'm going to start sending some postcards as soon as I get my stamps. So those are a couple of things that I've done. Again, I don't know how helpful it is to buy stamps, but it seems like sending money to the post office can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, Fast Company has an article here that I'm putting up. You can buy stamps. You can contact your congressional representative. There are activist groups you can join. And one tip here that I thought is pretty wise is vote early.
Yes, that's so important.
Vote early.
Yeah.
You can help ensure the USPS is not overwhelmed at the last minute. The website vote.org has a good roundup of early voting rules by state. So
because they are different in every state, right?
Yeah, and because of how the system has been gutted, they're likely to be overwhelmed this year. So
yes,
vote early if you can.
Yeah.
All right, Melissa, tell me about this other story that you read this week. I didn't even engage in this, but I heard about it.
Yeah.
So tell me about this story. So this is a story that was written about a 5-year-old's tragic killing, right?
Yeah.
Cannon Hinentz, right? This is a 5-year-old kid that was shot to death, right?
Like just point blank shot in his yard. Yeah. So like the first I heard about this story, and it kind of sent up my warning signals right away, was that in my Facebook feed, I saw primarily these white conservative Christians posting about this story. And
this is how far we've fallen as a society, is whenever you see all your Christian friends posting about something, the initial very reasonable reaction is, what is wrong with the story? Like there's something that is there's something that is not as it seems, basically, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the basic the basically facts of the case are this really tragic. I mean, it's this 5-year-old boy who was shot by a neighbor. This boy happens to be white and the neighbor happens to be black. So immediately you're like, okay, the conservatives are latching on to this, and it's this very gruesome story, which is tragic. But the first things they started posting were like, why is the media not talking about this? See, they're all slanted toward, one way of looking at things. And then they started putting this hashtag with this, say his name, which, which we can talk about in a moment. And then, it just kind of snowballed. And so it was one of those things where I just thought, I need to say something to these people, which again, many of them very well-meaning, but honestly, their diet of news really is limited to sources like Breitbart, the Daily Wire, sources that I wouldn't even necessarily call news, but they're just conservative media machines. But it's one of those things that's really hard to say, why are you posting about this? Because of course it's tragic. So you just sort of have to parse really kind of what's going on. I mean, the main...
Yeah, because it's challenging for you as just a friend, because you don't want to come in on social media to be like, how dare you mourn the tragic death of this 5-year-old? Because then you look like a massive asshole, right?
Exactly. That's the main difficulty in kind of going in on this. And then you have to talk about race in this too. So, but one of the kind of main things about this story that is just bizarre is that, so he was killed, but within hours, the person who allegedly shot him was arrested and is in jail. So right away, it's one of these things that they were trying to compare it clearly to Black Lives Matter and the injustice that happens to Black people in this country. And right away, if you just read the facts of the case, you see that there's no comparison to this, because this boy is immediately getting justice, which is what happens, really.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know that he will in fact get justice, but
right.
It's things seem to be well on their way,
Right.
But, yeah.
And if you contrast it to, say, Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor, who's the people that killed the cops who killed her are still not arrested. I mean, there is no. They're trying to make this boy into a hashtag, but he doesn't represent any larger problem of injustice. Right. Whereas the case of Ahmaud Arbery, the case of Breonna Taylor, these represent larger systemic injustices that are ongoing in this country. And so the Say Her Name hashtag came about, I believe it was in 2014 or 15, but it was specifically linked to the injustice of Black women and girls, being killed by police officers and then never having justice. So when they use this hashtag, say his name, there's just no comparison between those two things. So it was just really discouraging, again, to see, a lot of these white conservative Christians did, post things about racism around the George Floyd murder. And yet they're right back into this both sides kind of a thing and all lives matter type narrative. And so it's just so frustrating.
Yeah. And there's this Twitter thread by Lily, I want to say Lily Wolfborough, is that her name?
I don't know.
But it was this Twitter thread a long time ago. Maybe I think I'm completely butchering that. Let me make sure I have the actual username correct.
Okay.
But Lily Loufborough, that's right, Lily Loufborough. Mm-hmm. She did this viral Twitter thread a long time ago, like a few weeks ago, that I just thought was incredible. Mm-hmm. And basically, what the thrust of it was is that that online interaction has become impenetrable, maybe is the word I'm looking for, but essentially what she's saying is that the actions that you take online
Yeah.
Like you, Melissa, understand the subtext of what say his name in the case of this kid is,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Which is not like let's all mourn the tragic death of this child that should never
Exactly.
have happened, and it's like horrifyingly terrible.
Yes.
It's not that. It's
No.
actually, hey, look, like this kid is has tragically died. In addition, by the way, to all the black people that have died, and
Yes.
that's like why
That's
aren't
the
we talking about this
subtext.
instead?
Yeah.
That's the subtext.
Hmm.
However, if you just engage on like if you with that understanding, if you attempt to engage on it, you look like a crazy person. You
Yes.
look like a crazy person from the outside, right? Which is that
Yes.
like why would Melissa be against mourning the tragic death of this 5-year-old? She's a
Exactly.
heartless person. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And there's all this like coded language now. It's like this series of codes and like
Hmm.
where actually like the terminus is already predetermined in many
Yep.
times. Like you already know
Hmm.
where the conversation and argument's going to end.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I mean, the
Yep.
ultimate thrust, like she didn't necessarily make this conclusion, but like the ultimate conclusion is that online interaction is largely useless and destined for badness. Like there's no
Yeah.
way because of that,
Yeah.
because it's so impenetrable. There's no way you can talk to your friend and say, "Tone
Yeah.
it down with the mourning of the 5-year-old, please."
Right.
Like
Exactly.
there's no way you can say
Exactly.
that without sounding like a terrible person.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a sign of how toxic our online social interactions have gotten, I think.
Hmm.
And it's sad.
Yeah. I mean, you're really speaking a different language. And I kind of even thought like to interact with these people, I need to have everyone like sit down and like, let's do a media analysis class
Yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you have to get that deep, but in social media, you don't ever really go that deep. I mean, I recommended a piece for a couple of my friends to read, but they're not going to read it. They didn't read it. And they're still posting about
Yeah,
this boy.
yeah.
Uh, so
So not much really you can do, unfortunately, at least not online, right? Like
yeah,
this doesn't apply for in-person interactions, which are like much different, I think, but like for an
yeah.
online social media perspective,
Hmm.
I think it's just wise to not engage because there's no way to really do it in a way that comes off in the way you intend, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
It's really hard to do.
yeah.
Hmm.
So, anyway, um, anything else you want to talk about today before we wrap it up?
Um,
Anything else
oh,
people in the chat room want to talk about? Anything you want to ask us? Anything you want to share about how you are doing? Feel free to let us know in the chat as we wrap up right now. But we wanted to continue doing these check-ins
yeah.
and talk about what's happening and react to it as normal people would. But yeah, let us know. Let us know what you want to talk about in the various chats across the internet.
Yeah.
Here's a comment. Many AMC theaters opening this week, says
Oh,
Alvy Brown in Periscope.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh,
I've been
eight,
getting pressure from Regal because I bought a Regal Unlimited pass
oh, nice. Yeah.
right before the pandemic, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I got the email from AMC. They're like, we're cleaning
Hmm.
everything. Like a bunch of our theaters are already opening. The rest are going to be open soon. Are you going to go back to the theater anytime soon, Melissa?
No.
Yeah.
Just
I think that's me as well.
yeah. I mean, I don't. If the virus is airborne, which it is, and I don't see how you can get enough fresh air. You're sitting 2 hours in a confined space, relatively confined space. Even if you're far apart from people, you're still going to be eventually breathing the same air.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't see it.
I would be up for going if I could go in like a hermetically sealed suit of some kind,
There you
like
go. Yeah, I
with
would
my
be
own
up for
oxygen
that.
supply.
Right,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
that would be cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
I do miss going to the theater so much.
yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I agree. I agree. But yeah, I'm not planning on going back anytime soon, unfortunately.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I really feel for our
unless it's to see
indie
Tenet.
cinema.
I
Yeah.
mean, I might go. John Dotson asks, "Is seeing Tenet worth death?" I might go to see Tenet if I take like risk minimizing steps. So, for instance,
Really?
like going first thing in the morning.
Okay.
There were
No one's there.
people haven't
No
been there
air
all
has been there
day.
before. Yeah.
Um, like booking seats that are super far away from anyone else. Like the only 3 people are in the theater, booking seats super far away from anyone. Wearing a mask the entire time, not wearing gloves, not touching anything, like all this stuff. I could see it under those circumstances.
Mm.
But Patrick in YouTube chat says, just expand your bubble to 200 people and all buy tickets for the same show.
There you go.
I mean, so that's another thing I've considered. I mean, we talked about this, but like, if it's possible
Yeah.
to buy multiple tickets,
That's true.
if
For,
there's a small theater,
like people you
if there's
trust.
a small theater, right? If there's a small theater and they're already only selling to 50% capacity, and I could spend like $200 to watch Tenet, and that's the only movie I'd see the rest of the year. I wouldn't. All my movie budget is going into Tenet, and that's it for the rest of the
Yeah.
year. I would totally do that. Still not 100% safe because you'd be like walking to and from the theater in the hallways and stuff. But like,
Yep.
I could see myself do that.
Yeah. And when is
So-
it? When is it slotted to come out now? Again, with the
I
release
think
date
late
now?
August, early September.
Okay.
Early Labor Day, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan Pike says, with high quality films like Project Power available on Netflix, who needs theaters? Good question. So that is a joke because Project Power is not very good. I was just watching it before we started this broadcast. So,
Okay.
yeah. Patrick says, I don't know that I could even enjoy the movie with the amount of precaution I'd have to take.
I
think
know.
that's it.
I would be so distracted, I think.
Yeah, it's true.
I just can't
Yeah,
imagine.
no, it's true. It's true. That would impact your enjoyment.
Yeah.
DJM says, any follow-up on listening to Nice White Parents? Melissa, you've been listening to this podcast still?
Yes, I actually have. I didn't listen to the most recent episode, but it continues to be great. I think I've listened to 3 now. And I think, aren't they going to do a total of 5, something like that?
Yeah, it's still good in your opinion?
Yeah, it is really good. And it continues to follow this one kind of school and teases out, again, the impact of these actions that parents are taking that they think are for the benefit of everyone, but actually are not. My husband listened to the most recent one, and he said actually there's a little bit of a bit of hope in the most the most recent episode, that the school isn't completely wasn't completely sort of destroyed by these nice white parents. So I'm curious to hear that one.
It's nice to hear that is possible in this world.
Yes.
David Kovacs says, do it Crazy Rich Asian style, but invite nobody. So David Kovacs referring to the fact
there you go.
that I think it was last year, 2 years ago, I bought out a whole theater and gave away tickets for free to see Crazy Rich Asians.
Uh-huh.
The thing is, that cost like $1,000.
That's quite a commitment.
Yeah, and I don't know I'm ready to do that for 10. I mean, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just...
That would be probably the only way to do it, though.
That was really a way of like giving, like me attempting to give back to the community in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
and like,
and supporting this movie and
the filmmaking community, but also the Asian American community to support
Sure.
this movie in which Asian Americans are like represented in a big major way.
Yes.
But I don't know that I could do it just for me to see a movie. You know? Yeah.
That feels a little. You just like you bought out the whole theater for $1,000 and just you sitting there, you and your wife, maybe
to watch Tenet.
Yeah.
And even the thing is, even then, I wouldn't be confident that I was safe. That's the thing.
Well,
If I could
know.
be 100%
Who's been there
guaranteed,
before you? Yeah.
yeah, who's been there before? Who's like been expelling droplets before me? Like,
Yes.
if I could guarantee it, maybe. But like, you can't guarantee it. So it's like,
No.
imagine
You're still
doing that. Imagine doing that and then getting COVID. Then it's like, then you really feel like garbage. You know?
It really would be bad.
Yeah.
I spent $1,000 to have a safe like viewing experience, and it's not safe. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Melissa. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to discuss, or shall we wrap it up?
We could wrap. I guess like the ongoing stress I have is just like looking at what's happening in schools in our local county right now.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, the basic, so the local health department, right, as I kind of shared before, has recommended no schools go back face to face. Everybody should be remote. So all the public schools in the county are doing that. The only schools that are not doing that, David,
Yes.
are the Protestant Christian schools.
Well, are your kids going to any of these?
No, no, they're in
Okay,
they're in the public school
so
system.
you're
Yeah.
just bothered that some people think that God's going to protect them from the virus, basically.
Yes, I am. Well, and also, I mean, there's a
But
reason
they're not people
why.
that impact you until they unleash this virus upon the
Well,
populace.
exactly. Until that's like they all spread it to each other and then they spread it to the rest of the county, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because it doesn't just stay among the people that
Churches
attend
have
the
been a
school.
huge cause of super spreader events in the past. Has been
Right,
documented.
exactly,
So
exactly. And if churches aren't allowed, if churches follow these structures, like I kind of don't get actually why these private schools can meet kind of full time face to face without even like restrictions like masks, and churches can't even do that, right?
yeah,
So yeah, and so there's that. Just like honestly wondering about what the impact on the community, the entire county, will be because of these particular schools. And then also, I have nieces and nephews that will be going to these schools, so I'm, you know, just honestly, literally worried about their health and my family's health. Um, and talking about like a impenetrable wall, there's there's nothing I could really say to them that would deter them from, their choices to do that. So it's just, I know I just need to let it go, because I can't really do anything, but it's really hard not to, think about it and stress
yeah.
about it.
I hear you. I definitely have people in my life
Yeah.
that fall into that category as well. So
Yeah.
we will keep monitoring the situation. If you have enjoyed these kinds of chats, I'm still deciding exactly how to manage these, to talk about these. I just launched
Yeah.
a Patreon this week, thinking
Yeah.
about maybe putting these
Awesome.
conversations on the Patreon. I don't know, but where you can definitely keep track of them is by going to youtube.com/uncertain times. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. You'll get a notification every time we go live. You'll be able to watch the live broadcast on VOD afterwards. But that's where you can find our stuff primarily right now. But in the meantime, you can find more of Melissa's stuff on Twitter. She's at 1AprilDay. I'm at Dave Chensky. Back me on Patreon at patreon.com/DaveChen. Thanks for watching. See you next time.